Okay, welcome to Meldrum Art Watercolour Journeys. On this episode I'm in Mijayima, the island of Mijayima, which is close to Hiroshima. And I'm painting the O-Torii gate, which is part of the Itsushima shrine.
We're going to Mijayima. Hopefully we'll stay here the whole day. It's a nice day here in Japan. Yeah.
So in this episode I'll be doing two demonstrations, a sketch demonstration and a final studio demonstration. Okay, so here I am at Mijayima, and this very famous iconic gate behind me is the gateway to the Shinto shrine that's further up the hill here. And yeah, it's very beautiful. It's also very touristy, but I think I'll sketch the gate. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Okay, so I'm sketching here on my Saunders Waterford sketchbook, and I start by wetting the page, and I speed up here. So first I'm using cobalt blue and a little bit of verditer blue, and then you can see I've zoomed ahead here, and I'm using a bit of turquoise light and some ochre. And then I start actually painting the gate, and again I'm using a mixture of ochre and cadmium orange. So now you can see I'm putting in the contrasts, speed it up again of course, so it doesn't become boring. And yeah, so that's basically the sketch. Of course I have to put the reflections of the poles in the water. I didn't like the initial one, so I blurred them a little bit, which made it better, I think. So. Anyway, that's the final sketch, so I was quite happy with that. And here's an actual photograph that I took later. So it was a great day, and but on the way home there was a surprise. Yeah, this was the surprise. It was a different angle, and the sun was setting, and I just fell in love with this image. So I said, oh, I have to do this, I have to do a sketch of this. But of course, we had to go home and there was no time, so I did a sketch later. Yeah, so here's the sketch I did when I got home to Stockholm. What I really like about this sketch, which I want to transfer onto a bigger painting, a full arc of Saunders paper. What I wanted to take from this sketch over to the painting, one is the kind of Japanese calligraphy style of the branches and leaves that I've managed to create there, which I'm very happy with, and also this monochromatic effect, and then I've done a little sketch here where you can see that, no you can't see, but anyway, there's a kind of, I made a note for myself that there should be a little Z in the water. And the reason for that is to lead people to the O-Torii gate. So I'm using yellow ochre, Winsor Newton, and a little bit of Jaune Brilliant #1 by Holbein. And yeah, first a little circle, and then with a bit of water I soften the edges of that. And then it's a big race really, basically, to not to leave any lines on the surface. So I have to go quite fast here. And cover the surface as much as possible with my base colour, which is basically yellow ochre. Actually, the brush I chose here was wrong, it's too small, so I wasn't able to cover the surface fast enough with the small brush, so it was a bit stressful. So I have to really work hard here to cover the surface. As you can see, it's probably starting to dry there on the right hand side. And then I have to jump over to the right, and then I have to jump back to the left. And yeah, it's important to say there that the table is at an angle. It's about, I'd say, 10 to 15 degrees, so that the watercolour pigments can travel downwards. So this is kind of a very watery mix. I'm just staining the watercolour paper really at this stage, and leaving some highlights. You see I speed it up here, but basically it's important. I've left some highlights there on the water. It's all very subtle. Okay, and now I'm mixing in some cooler colours. While everything's still wet. Again, I'm trying to be very subtle. This is just a background colour, and it won't be noticeable. That's my goal anyway. That it shouldn't be noticeable in the end. So. Okay, keep spraying with a water bottle, trying to keep the surface, keeping it alive. And okay, speed it up here again, keeping it wet, and yeah. So there we are, almost at the end of the first stage. So I'll let that dry pretty soon. So now it's dry. Once it's dry, I have to wet it again in the places I want it to be wet. Because I want to put in the mountains, and I don't want them to be sharp because they're in the distance, so I need to make it soft. So so with a Hakke brush, I am wetting the background, and I'll leave this soak in. It's important that it's not too wet, otherwise everything goes, all the colour just flows around the place out of control. you have to leave it soak in a bit and let it dry a little bit, and then it's a matter of practice really, when you know that it's the right level of dryness or dampness, and then I can add mountains in the background. Okay, so now I'm mixing my colors for the background. These are quite thicker. If it's too watery, they'll just diffuse into the background. Because the background, of course, the paper is still a bit damp, and so there has to be a fair amount of pigment on my brush. So okay, so it's time to start doing the hills. So it's important to just try and do quick, confident strokes. Here I'm mixing a bit of cool greys with a little bit of yellow ochre to suggest beaches, etc. I don't know who said it, but the least amount of strokes you can use, the better, really. Just singular, confident strokes. It'll look so much better. Saying that again, I'm using a brush that's maybe a bit too small, so I have to do quite a few strokes here, even though against my will. These mountains to the left won't be visible in the end, so I'm not too concerned about them. Okay, I'm just trying to put some shading into the mountains to give them some kind of form, but again, there's so much in the background. I don't want to put much detail there. So now I'm mixing my colors, some cold blues and some warmer yellows and Jaune Brilliant #1 from Holbein. So now I'm doing you could say the mid-distance. Personally, I think I went a bit too dark here, and actually maybe I started off a bit too dark in the background. It could have been a bit lighter. So I've had to. This happens, and one has to rethink and create a new approach to the painting. So, but anyway, it's no disaster by any means. So I'll just keep going. I think it's looking a little flat here, so I'm going to change the line there of the beach here. You can see it. So I put in some bit more yellow ochre into the blue, and then I have to blend this area together. At this stage, it's just you just go with your gut feeling, really. There is no rules here. You just have to do the best you can. What's important with these areas is that they don't become too lifeless. So let's try and add different colors, maybe spray it with a little bit of water or whatever, just to make it more interesting. Here I don't want the beach to be a hard line, so I want this area just to blur. So that's what I'm doing here. I get into a little bit of a problem here later with the O-Torii gate. It would have been wiser maybe for me to mask it, but I really don't like masking. It leaves hard lines, and I just don't like the hardness and the awkwardness of masking with some masking fluid or something. Sometimes I do, but for highlights and things. But so I decided to not mask it and then to try and wash the colour out of the poles later. Here I am, just wiping off any dots. Sometimes you can just turn little dots of colour into birds or whatever, but on this occasion I didn't want a flock of birds. So with a kind of a light wash like this, it's actually totally okay to wipe any drips and spots away. But remember that background yellow is dry. If it was wet, it would mark. You can see the way I'm using the spray bottle there. I'm kind of masking the area to the right with my hand, and this gives me control of where I spray. So now, if you can see past my head, I'm now trying to remove as much of the background as possible from the actual pillars. And I use these baby wipes, you know, the kind of smaller ones, facial wipes, I think, for cleaning your skin. I always have a pack of these handy, so I can guarantee that I have a damp, strong cloth that doesn't break up on my watercolour. If you're using some cheap kitchen roll, it can be a bit frustrating. So I use these baby wipes. So, to repeat the colours I use Viditer Blue by Holbein. I use Cobalt Blue by Winsor Newton, French Ultramarine by Winsor Newton, Jaune Brilliant No. 1 by Holbein, and Yellow Orchid from Winsor Newton. I think these are the colours I've been mainly using on this painting so far. Is there any reason why I use these? No, not really. It's just I started off with Winsor Newton, and then I try other brands from time to time. And Chen Chunwei, who's one of my what would you say, inspirations, you could say. I was on a course with him, and he uses Holbein, which is very popular in Asia, and so that's why I use a few Holbeins. They're actually pretty hard for me to get my hands on here in Sweden, so I have to order them online. Oh, and there's a few spots there. They're a bit more difficult to remove, as you can see. So you're probably a little bit panicked here at this stage. I have to try and get rid of them. Okay, so I kind of started with it kind of dark, a bit of turquoise, a bit of French ultramarine, and a bit of burnt umber. Actually, my burnt umbers, I think it's I'm using a bit of Daniel Smith there, so I'm using several brands. Anyway, you can see that I've cleared up my little mess there, and now it's back to painting up, putting some water onto it so to bring it back to life. And as I'm focused on that, I put my little head in the way. Apologies for my head. Okay, so now we're moving on. I'm wetting the surface again. It's important to wet the surface so that it's so it feels alive when you're painting, that colors spread. And of course, like just in a second now, I'm going to see that I spray somewhere or I wet where maybe I shouldn't, and it starts blurring like crazy. And I have to, again, you just make adjustments. You say, whoops, well, I didn't really intend to do that. But that's the way it is. And then you just have to get on with it. So I'm going to do the foreground here. So again, I'm thinking about my Z here. I want the focus to be on the gate, so I'm trying to bring the attention of the viewer to the gate. And here, yeah, this is where it got a bit messy. But you have, part of the skills of watercolor, you could say, although this wasn't very skilled because I made a mistake, but But there are skills of saving your watercolor and knowing how far you can go to when you can and when you can't remove and add color, etc. So here I know that the paper's still damp, and I'll be able to make this save this and such, so that one isn't going to notice. Some hairs there on the left side, which I guess I'm going to have to remove. So here I'm using thicker paint, and yeah, I'm just trying to create this curve, and I'm trying to create the illusion of water. And while I don't want waves, I still want a feeling of movement in the water in front of me. So these dark strokes diffuse and become lighter as the pigment spreads in the damp paper. Here I'm probably removing my dots that I just splattered there. This is quite a large painting. It's 70 by 50 centimeters. So strokes have to be quite fast and confident, and it's difficult. So I do not suggest that you try this at home, folks. Use a lot smaller. I use mostly at home. I use 26 by 36 format. So it's basically a quarter arc of watercolor paper as well, and that's fine. These larger ones are more for exhibitions, etc. Paper's still damp, so I can put in little ripples and things there and keep them soft. Don't want any hard lines in the foreground there. And here I feel it should be darker. Again, I haven't put the foreground in, which is the branches, which will be coming from the left and going towards the right, towards the gate. And these will be sharp and dark and hard, because that'll be the foreground. But of course it's difficult to know the level of darkness I should have the gate and its reflections at this point. So one just has to guess and do one's best. I guess it's called experience, and it gets easier as the years go by. Oh, and there's my head again. Okay, so it's time to do the foreground. So I'm cleaning my palette. Again, I'm using one of those baby wipes. just going to remove the pigment. Okay, so now I'm working on the mountain again, and I'm just trying to get some kind of texture going, some kind of depth. And I'm using, you can see, a Chinese calligraphy brush there, which I will be using later for the branches as well. I just thought, you know, when I'm doing an Asian theme, I'd like to have some Asian brushes. And they're actually very nice to paint. So now I'm preparing to do the branches. I'm using a Chinese calligraphy brush again, and I'm making this pigment very thick. Yeah, I realized here that it would be wise for me to do a little test first on a piece of scrap watercolor paper. And I can see there that it's too dry, so I'm going to add a bit more water to the pigment. So I'm a bit happier with that. And then it's just going for it. I think this is the exciting part of watercolor, is that it's just so easy to mess it up from this point. So I turn the brush on its side to try and create the illusion of foliage. And yeah. So and then from now on, it's more a question of design. You're trying to make it pretty. And so you're not looking at the reference picture at the stage at all. You're just saying, okay, how can I make this feel good? So at the moment I think it's basically a bit too heavy on the left-hand side of the picture, so I'm going to have to add more branches that come over towards the left and kind of lead to the gate, because I want everything to point towards the gate. So again, I'm using very thick pigment. I'm holding the brush at the very end of the shaft of the brush, so this gives me a looser touch. So I'm trying to create that Japanese calligraphy feeling. So yeah, so the rest of this is basically me just trying to design branches. basically coming to the end of the painting, and here I'm using some opaque gouache to add some highlights that I lost at one point, and and some without, you could either use masking fluid, or but I prefer to use a little bit of gouache to put some highlights. The important thing with gouache is that you just don't go overboard, which is the temptation is to. And so this I think is just white gouache. I also tend to add a little bit of Jaune Brilliant, #1, Holbein, into the white gouache, so that it's not too severe. But right here, I think it's actually 100% white gouache. I think it's I use permanent white, it's called. So these little highlights are very important to just to try and bring the water to life, to capture that feeling from the photographs. That's it, I'm finished. Not sure what I think of it right now. I'm too close to it. But I'll look at it tomorrow and see. And then of course I'll ask my family what they think. And they're my best critics. And okay, so it's time to move on to the next painting. Meldrum Art Watercolour Journeys goes to Coleraine in Northern Ireland, with the Giant's Causeway. That's next. Okay, see you soon. If you like this video, please give it a like and hit the subscribe button. And there's a little notification button there as well, which you can click. Okay, see you next time.